The book reviewer, our own son, all the way from Putu local government area, a man whose name has rang bell across Nigeria and the world because he's a very, very respected son of the nation, a respected academician, a professor. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Professor Benedict Benedict. Let's put our hands together for him.
Thank you, MC. We don't have time, so just go ahead. Zone to Bawali, Urukulukula by Yarafora. If the gods are not cruel, they will die of hunger and starvation. The zone to go Bawali, and Mamma Domini and Miaka Maparasa, Emily Miaka no go what of a pregnant. Me check we are penning the pen. Come away Monday, allow it Monday, come. And Mamma Doy, you can never come to me. I've been your baby. Good foul. The acting chairman, Franklin Daya, the author of the book, Chief Monday Clement, Secretary to the Royal Council of the Okija Kingdom, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, we are gathered here on the prompting of destiny, this historic day to make public Warri Federal Constituency delineation, Itsekiri and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lives. A novelty history book which is an intertextual response to legendary Itsekiri lives in an Itsekiri book titled INEC and Corrupt Practices. The Siamese twins and Warri Federal Constituency. We are here to celebrate the author who throws critical insights into the conflict in Warri Federal Constituency. It is a book written by Monday Clement. He attended the College of Technology Benin, Edo, and a diploma in computer engineering, awarded by the College of Continuing Education, University of Port Harcourt, River State. He is a graduate of mechanical engineering from the Polytechnic Ibadan, Oyo State. He also holds a master's degree in criminology and crime control from the Delta State University, Abraka, 2011, and was conferred with the title of Perefungeway of Okija Warri Kingdom in 2015. Monday Keme is not a newcomer in writing. His earlier books include Ownership of Warri, Claims and Counter-Claims, 2006, Ijaw Child and Ijaw Language, 1997, non-published, History of Computer and Internet, 2009, Enslavement of the Nigerian Workers, Who is Responsible, 2010, Fundamentals to Basic Computer Knowledge, 2015, Contemporary Security Challenges in an Emerging Democracy of Nigeria, Civil Diary of Alaja and Okija Boundary Dispute 2020, Parables and Quotations in Memory of Chris Gomorrah. We are a diverse congregation of historical authors, readers, and hearers, united in our quest for truth and understanding. I, your humble interpreter, narrator, shall guide you through the labyrinthine complexities of this riveting narrative. The cover of this book is symbolic. It features a dark marbled background that evokes the solemnity of the subject matter. It presents a stack of aged law books at the down right corner. Their spines worn and slightly open to reveal faint text. Resting atop the book is a polished wooden gavel, its air gleaming as if freshly struck. Behind the gavel, subtly overlaid, is the classic blindfolded Lady Justice symbol, as scales balanced and a sword clenched in one hand, rendered in a muted golden tune. The title, Warri Federal Constituency Delineation Itsekiri, and the challenges of sustaining the burden of lives written in bold serif letters at the top, while the author's name appears in uppercase typed at the bottom. The law book represents the weight of precedents and the written statistics that shape the disputes over Warri boundaries. The gavel is the instrument of judgment, signaling the court's decisive role in delineating the constituency. Behind them, the blindfolded figure of justice scales in and embodies impartiality and the quest for fairness, reminding readers that the story is as much about legal principle as it is about competing claims and the burden of truth. Together, the elements convey a narrative of conduct, authority, and the hope that justice will prevail. The book is a narrative of conflict, authority, and the enduring quest for truth, expertly woven into 5 parts, guiding the reader through the complex history of the Warri Federal Constituency. Part 1 sets the stage, introducing the constituency's ethnic composition and 3 local government areas: Warri South-West, Warri South, and Warri North. The historical context unfolds in Part 2, tracing the evolution of the constituency from colonial-era councils, Warri Divisional Council and Warri Urban District Council, to its current form. This foundation paves the way for Part 3, where the competing ownership claims of the Itsekiri, Ijo, and Urhobo peoples are presented, focusing on the contested Okwejo urban area. Part 4 highlights the indigenous communities within each local government area, showcasing their historical identities and the legal instruments that recognize their autonomy, including the Chief Law of 1957 and the Delta State Traditional Rulers Edict of 1999. Warri Federal Constituency Delineation Itsekiri, the challenges of sustaining the burden of lives, culminates in Part 5, where the Supreme Court's delineation order attempts to obstruct it, and the subsequent field works are recounted. The proposed electoral wards for each local government area are summarized, illustrating the implications of the judicial outcome. Themes. Running through the narrative are several major themes. Land is inseparable from identity, so each ethnic group ties its sense of self to the territory of Warri. Power and politics intersect as colonial councils, later reforms, and party interests redraw boundaries to serve the powerful. The tension between written law and customary law creates a constant friction, while the quest for justice asks whether the legal system can deliver an impartial solution amid deep grievances. Finally, the book examines how truth and deception shape the competing histories and how the delineation of words determine who receives resources and representation. The book's cover sets the tone for a story where the land and identity are inseparable. The Itsekiri, Ijo, and Urhobo people each bind their sense of self to the soil of Warri, and those ties fuel the competing claims over the federal constituency. Inside, the book moves from a clear overview of the Warri federal constituency and its 3 local government areas to a historical walkthrough of the colonial era, Warri Divisional Council and Warri Urban District Council, showing how power and politics have reshaped boundaries to serve the interests of the powerful. The middle section lays out the rival narratives, the legal instruments that recognize local autonomy, and the clash between law versus tradition, court rulings against chiefs, edicts, and customary land rights. The Supreme Court's delineation order anchors the discussion of justice and fairness, asking whether the judicial system can deliver an impartial solution amidst deep-seated grievances. Throughout the subtitles, Burden of Lies underscores the theme of truth and deception, revealing how histories are twisted and myths are weaponized to bolster or undermine claims. Finally, the book shows that the redrawing of words is not a dry technical exercise, but a decisive factor in development and representation, determining who receives resources, political voice, and progress. By weaving together the cover symbolism, the book structure, and these 6 interlocking themes, the work offers a comprehensive portrait of a contested geopolitical constituency where land, identity, power, and justice, truth, and development collide. Mr. Keme's Warri Federal Constituency delineation, Itsekiri, and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lies lends heavily on the precise, almost forensic diction of legal discourse. Terms like delineation, autochthonous, edict, and jurisdiction appear alongside citations of statutes and court rulings, giving the narrative a weighty, authoritative fit. At the same time, the author injects a narrative pause. Homegrown place names, Obijo, Isaba, Diabri, Baramatu, and Egbema, are rendered with a lyrical cadence and the subtitle phrase, the burden of lies, hints at a more emotive, polemic tone. Overall, the language is deliberate. It balances rigorous legal exposition with a narrative drive that makes the complex history of Warri Federal Constituency both accessible and compelling. It is a non-fiction work that sits at the intersection of political history, legal analysis, ethnography, or a political legal history about the politics and law in Warri constituency. The author Monday Keme, in the preliminary pages, specifically page 7, notes, the purpose of writing this book, therefore, is to state the facts as they are and to reach out to those who wish to know the facts of the matter as it relates to the Supreme Court ordered delineation of Warri Federal Constituency of Delta State. It is also glaring that the driving intellectual force of this book is intertextuality, and the methodology of delivery used by the author is the law of dialectics, based on an earlier thesis, a counter-thesis, and a synthesis. This simply means using current text to respond to a former text. The text that Kevin responded to with Warri Federal Constituency delineation, Itsekiri and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lies, is titled INEC and Corrupt Practices, the Siamese Twins and Warri Federal Constituency. The author is not mentioned. Warri Federal Constituency delineation, Itsekiri and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lies reads like a layered conversation, a piece of intertextual scholarship that deliberately positions itself against a prior lie about Warri's political history and geography. Its chapters constantly echo, cite, and rebut the earlier narrative, turning the book into a dialogue with that false account written by the Itsekiri-centric writer, rather than a stand-alone monologue. Every claim about the land, identity, or legal precedent is framed as a direct response to the misinformation, a way of writing back and backward or talking back in post-colonial subaltern parlance to the text that first distorted the history of the constituency. In that sense, the author is not just presenting facts, he is weaving a fundamental thread into the existing needlework of discourse, switching together court judgments, colonial status, oral histories, and a contested book that sparked a controversy. Warri Federal Constituency delineation, Itsekiri and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lives is a response to manipulative history. If the ancient currents of tradition, the ink of colonial charters, and the solemn language of modern law all point to a shared ownership of the Warri Federal Constituency by the Ijaw, the Itsekiri, and the Urhobo alike, by what experimentation can any one group claim exclusive ownership? The author answers with a measured thunder. The claim that the constituency belongs solely to the Itsekiri rests on a fragile scaffolding of selective memory, not on the weight of the evidence. The very documents that marked the region, treaties signed under the British flag court, decrees that balanced competing claims, oral histories that have echoed through the mangrove geography for generations, all converge on a single truth. The land has always been a tapestry woven from multiple threads, each color essential to the whole. To sweep aside these testimonies in favor of an ethnocentric narrative is to let the tide of imperialistic revisionism drown the voices that have long called this Warri Federal Constituency a home. It is to silence the Ijaw chants that rise from the creeks to mute the Urhobo drums that beat on the hinterland, not far from the river banks, and to erase the lived reality that the Itsekiri themselves came later to share the space with their neighbors for centuries. Kemen's book, under review, does not merely ask whether the Itsekiri version of history attempts to seize the voice of the other. It declares that such an attempt is a betrayal of the very principle of justice that the law purports to uphold. The question, therefore, is not whether the Itsekiri can claim exclusivity, but whether we, as a society, will allow a singular self-serving narrative to override the multiple truths that colonial maps, legal judgments, and indigenous memory have preserved. The answer, we insist, must be a resounding no, a call to honor the shared heritage of this constituency in question, and to reject the imperialistic erasure that will flatten a vibrant patchwork into a grey uniformity. The lies and false claims made by Itsekiri ethnic nationality through its imperialistic historian draws from the attention of Kemen to the question of manipulative history. And in the next few minutes, I will be talking about everything concerning manipulative history. Manipulative history often distorts the truth by presenting a biased interpretation of events, omitting key facts and misrepresenting evidence to fit a specific narrative or ideology. This can be achieved through propaganda, simplification, or stereotyping, which can be used to influence opinions or beliefs. The Itsekiri history of Warri justifies the subheadings of manipulative history, which is clearly characterized by biased interpretation, omission of key facts, distortion of evidence, propaganda, simplification or stereotyping, lack of transparency, and emotional manipulation. When you interrogate the Itsekiri history of Warri through these subheadings, it becomes clear that the narrative exhibits characteristics of manipulative history, which can be used to justify a particular agenda or ideology. Ideologies fronted by the book INEC and Corrupt Practices, the Siamese Twins, and Warri Federal Constituency. By erasing or distorting certain narratives or perspectives, manipulative history can lead to a lack of understanding and appreciation of the complexities of the past. Furthermore, manipulative history can inform poor decision-making and policy development in the present, as inaccurate lessons are drawn from a distorted past. Ultimately, manipulative history suppresses the promoting of accurate and distinct historical narratives. Why this book is valuable? Warri Federal Constituency delineation, the Itsekiri, and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lies is a one-stop archive of the whole Warri boundary saga. The author dug up colonial council documents, Supreme Court orders, local edicts, and oral testimonies. So you get the raw materials instead of just a recap. Second, it is interdisciplinary. History, law, political science, and anthropology about Warri Federal Constituency are all wrapped up in one narrative. That synthesis offers us the opportunity to see how land, identity, power, and justice intersect clearly. Third, the burden of lies angle turns the whole book into a counter-narrative. By directly confronting the false version that has been circulating, the book becomes a case study in how truth-making works in postmodern and post-colonial politics. Fourth, it is practical. Anyone drafting electoral maps, policy makers, or activists can pull concrete lessons about boundary delineation, the limits of court orders, and the costs of ignoring local identities. Finally, the writing balances scholarly rigor with vivid storytelling, thus presenting the depth of a book without drowning in jargon, making it useful for academics and curious readers alike. The book is not just about a contested constituency, it is a solid piece of scholarship. Warri Federal Constituency delineation, Itsekiri, and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lies is a forensic excavation of a constituency that has been mapped, remapped, and made for over a century. Each cover already tells you the stakes, a stack of whether haunted law volumes, a polished gavel resting on them, and looming behind it all, a blindfolded justice with her scales. The book whispers the weight of statutes, treaties, and court orders. The gavel marks the movement of judges' pen, can redraw the border. The blindfolded figure reminds every reader that fairness must be blind, even when the ground beneath is soaked in ethnic memory. The book reminds us of a duty to remember the past and suggests lucidly that memory is an inevitable feature of the historiographic landscape of the Ijaw nation. Deploying the theory of deconstruction, a writer's work means more than what the writer intends it to mean. Mr. Keme's seminal work detonates a bombshell in the historiography of the Warri Federal Constituency. It established the fact that the Itsekiri authors like William Moore started this unique manipulative and revisionist history, probably influenced by historians like P.A. Talbot, who distorted the history of Prince Inua migration and its connection with the Ijaws of Amatu. Although both authors established the truth that the Ijaws are the oldest ethnic nation in the Warri Federal Constituency, their history of where Inua actually lived with the Ijaws and got married to his first wife, who gave birth to 3 children, is distorted. It is a manipulation and a gap filled by the historical narration of M. Keme in tandem with the age-long between the oral and archival history. Most flammable is Keme's demolition of the Itsekiri claim to Warri. His book, under review and intellectual interrogation, questions the essence of the Itsekiri ownership and overlordship myth of Warri. The evidence marshal is damning. Warri is hosting a royal guest, a king whose comfort with his people in exile to operate an agency that pursues the agenda of imperial dominion. A king clinging to the vestiges of power. This is a profound reckoning, one that shatters the myth of the Itsekiri hegemony and heterocentricity. Kerry's book further gives a bulwark to an aspect of the Warri history that I am familiar with. It was in 1921 Donoma played a dirty political game with Colonel Monas, Secretary Southern Province Ibadan, who directed Douglas, the resident commissioner in Warri, to cause the establishment of a hybrid kingdom of Itsekiri, Urhobo and Ijaw, with the criminal schemer to place the Itsekiri over the others. The implication that there was no acceptable Warri kingdom from the Genesis. The man who paraded as Olu of Warri was neither a traditional ruler of Itsekiri, nor was he installed by the Itsekiris. And he was a creation of British colonialism, who had no respect for the traditions of the land because of our economic interests. While the traditional ruler of Itsekiri went by the title Olu of Itsekiri, the colonially created paramount ruler, Donoma, proclaimed himself Olu of Warri against the Itsekiri tradition and against the cultural and political identities and spaces of the Ijaws and Urhobos. An ambition propelled by his bloated ego as President Warri, Native Courts and Appeal and member Nigerian Council. History is witness to the fact that vocal voices like Chief Bekederemo of Capital rejected and protested against this criminality, this criminally created hybrid kingdom. The grand design of this political entrapment was to put the Ijaws under the perpetual domination of the Itsekiris. It was in 1952 Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the action group leader, reinforced the lie of Warri Kingdom under an Itsekiri Olu as overlord, submerging Urhobo and Ijaw to vassalage to settle political vendetta. That was purely the act of political oppression, identity annihilation, and economic deprivation. Thus, it was Itsekiri ethnocentrism, fanned by imperialism, political and economic cannibalism, that propelled them to maintain the falsehood created by Colonel Monas. The then Warri resident commissioner Douglas and Chief Obafemi Awolowo till date. The appendix containing documents of ownership of aboriginal presence at Warri Township by the Ijaws range from 1906 to 2004. These valid documents include a map showing Ijaw land in Warri Township, leased to the colonial government in 1906 and 1908, the Warri Township assessment by Mr. Pretori on 13/6/1926, a document showing Warri Divisional Council, Warri Urban District Council, 1955, 1963, census of Ijaw population in Warri Township, traditional rulers and chiefs edict of 1999, law excluding territories of Ijaw from claims and control of the Olu of Itsekiri people, the laws of Bendel State of Nigeria, Delta State Traditional Rulers Law, 1995, recognizing the Amalpos of Ijaw, Warri Kingdom in both Warri South and Warri Southwest LGA as contained in the Delta States Nigeria Gazettes of 1999 and Delta State Community Development Committee of 2004, Ijaw Warri urban areas delineated under Agbara CDC. While these legal and colonial documents of Ijaw ownership of Warri Township fall within the 20th and 21st centuries, it is pertinent to underscore that the earlier and original settlement of the Jos, including the Okpe Jos, in the present Warri Federal Constituency was confirmed and reported by a Portuguese explorer, De Vert Pereira, in his book titled Esmeralda, 1502 to 1505. A further confirmation of the aboriginal history of the ancient Jos, who settled in this area far back as the 10th to 11th century BC, from the primordial Agadabapo, now near Wilberforce Island, is strongly rooted in the history book of the Jos. If Warri Township was founded by Enwe or Enwe, the founder of Okpe Jos Kingdom, and this is impeccably and adequately recognized by government. Recognized by government, Itsekiri leaders, historians, and colonial governments. Why is it not a falsity of falsity that Warri Township and Warri Federal Constituency are exclusively owned by the Itsekiris? Again, if the ancient currents of tradition, the ink of colonial charters, and the language of modern law all points to a shared ownership of the Warri Federal Constituency by Itsekiri, by John Itsekiri and the local people. By what logic can any one group claim exclusive ownership? Clement answers with a measured thunder. The claim that the constituency belongs solely to the Itsekiri rests on a fragile scaffolding of selective memory, ethnocentric ego, pathological imperialistic agenda, and manipulative history, not on the full corpus of evidence. I may sound magisterial here, but the truth is that treaties signed under the British flag, Supreme Court decrees that balanced competing claims, and oral histories that have echoed through mangrove creeks for generations, all converge on a single truth which establishes the Jos of present-day Warri Southwest, Warri South, and Warri North as aboriginal owners and occupants of and in the Warri Federal Constituency. As a matter of fact, Mr. Keme's book breaks the boundaries of the long-held notion of the Itsekiri exclusive ownership of Warri and dismisses it to peripheral shadows. It challenges the conventional notion of Warri ownership reality by questioning its dominant narratives, pushes limits, subverts expectations, presents new insights, and deletes its dangerous fiction. The book raises and restores the suppressed voice of the Jos. Warri Federal Constituency delineation, the Itsekiri and the challenge of sustaining the burden of lies failed to fully flesh out the earlier book's arguments. Instead of laying out the opposing author's arguments in full, even in an independent chapter, it jumps straight into rebuttal. This is purely a dialectical writing. Readers have not read the primary and former book by the Itsekiri writer and left guessing what exactly is being countered, which weakens the intertextual punch. Recommendations. The battle for supremacy over the Warri Federal Constituency has raged on for long. Clearly, we witness historical revisionism, historical weaponization and manipulation, conspiracy of law, the practice of ethnocentricity, political proclamation, policies, authority, and forces against the Jos of this space. Despite all these mighty forces, truth cannot be buried. I therefore appeal to the Jos of this troubled space to stand firm on the side of history and the favorable legal proclamations. Sons and daughters who go the extra length to to pursue legal means and write historical books in defense of this space should be given the support they deserve. Mr. Keme, the author of Warri Federal Constituency Delineation, Itsekiri and the Challenges of Sustaining the Burden of Lives, should be robustly funded so that it can be republished in a proper book format and in a reputable publishing house for the entire world to see and appreciate. If there is plan for a second edition, we are in a world of globalization empowered by digital technology. Our ideas and history must be spread to the rest of the world. I recommend that a chapter containing the arguments made against the judge in INEC and corrupt practices, the Siamese twins, Warri Federal Constituency, should be added to this book. I also suggest the book should contain a foreword written by a renowned Ijaw historian. This book is purely a self-publication, and the author is the publisher. The author in page 3 of the book established the fact that the title Ethnic Inhabitants of Warri Federal Constituency, that there are 3 ethnic nationalities in the constituency: Ijaw, Urhobo, and Itsekiri. In this context of shared ownership of Warri Federal Constituency, with each ethnic group having clear-cut boundaries of ownership, it is only reasonable this entangled fates of geopolitical division can become a powerful catalyst for peace and development for Warri. It is high time they recognize this age-long interconnectedness, not only as a foundation for stability and prosperity, but drive multicultural collaboration to share pathways. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the world's author and writer of the moment, Monday Keme, an independent researcher, historian, and a prominent community leader who keeps the moral, philosophical, and historical flags of his job higher through prompt and detailed historical research and writing, who sees and embellishes his thoughts with the tongue of the pen, a special mortal blessed by God from the Old Ijaw Kingdom, who hears the ancestors' voice of history, who thinks and writes historically, who writes deeply on the pages of thought in his soul, and who voices his vision into images of liberation, who has journeyed stylishly from the tall, serene environment of Old Ijaw Kingdom to this height of intellectual celebration. I present to you the latest book, Warri Federal Constituency Delineation, Itsekiri and the Challenge of Sustaining the Burden of Lives, from the intellectual bench of M. Keme and from the bucolic home of His Royal Majesty, King Corporal Maxim Olomoni, Mount Bene III, the Perea Mankosu, King of the Ijaw Kingdom, Warri Delta State, Nigeria. A book that is a must-read for scholars, students, governments, historians, and all who seek to understand the complexities of Warri Federal Constituency. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all for now.